All right, everyone, welcome back to another deep dive. And today, we're going to look at VeinTrain. They're taking on venepuncture and cannulation training.
Yeah, these are things, everyone's had to have their blood drawn or an IV put in, right?
Yeah,
But most people don't realize that there's a pretty high failure rate when it comes to these procedures.
right. You would think something like that would be pretty basic, but then you hear about these failure rates, and it's kind of shocking, actually.
Yeah. For something as common as cannulation, there are studies that show it could be up to 69% failure rate. And there was this one case where a patient needed more than 30 attempts to put in a cannula over a single weekend. I mean, can you imagine?
Ooh, that sounds awful. Not to mention the cost of all those failed attempts.
Right. It's a huge waste of resources. And of course, it's not very pleasant for the patient either. So you've got patient discomfort, you've got these high failure rates, the cost implications. I mean, how does VeinTrain even begin to address all that?
Well, that's what we're here to find out, right? So what is it about VeinTrain's approach that sets them apart? What are they doing differently?
Okay, well, first of all, they've got this really interesting flat pack vein trainer that they use. Basically, it's a low-cost portable simulation device that lets trainees practice these procedures over and over again, but without needing a real patient.
Oh, I see. So it's like a practice dummy for drawing blood and putting in IVs.
Exactly. And they combine that with a blended learning approach. So you have online modules, videos, live sessions, even a competency assessment.
Hmm, that's smart. It's not just about learning the theory, it's about making sure they can actually do it. So tell me more about this flat pack vein trainer, though. What's so special about it?
Well, for one thing, it has what they call a naked vein design, which means it's transparent. So trainees can actually see where their needle is going, what angle they're using, all of that.
Ah, that makes sense. You're taking the guesswork out of it. So with the flat pack trainer and the blended learning approach, it sounds like they've covered a lot of bases. But what about accessibility? There are healthcare workers all over the world in all sorts of settings. How does VeinTrain reach those who might not have easy access to in-person training?
Well, that's where the online aspect comes in. It's incredibly accessible. Anyone with an internet connection can get this high quality training. They can learn at their own pace, on their own schedule.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, it's kind of like they're democratizing access to this essential skills training. So let's talk about the people behind VeinTrain. Who are the brains behind this whole operation?
Well, the CEO is Sarah Phillips, and she has a really interesting background. She used to be an emergency nurse, and she has a master's in systems psychodynamics of organizations.
Wow, that's not your typical CEO resume.
Definitely not. But, it's kind of what gives her this unique perspective on healthcare training. She really gets it. And she's even co-authored a book on venepuncture and cannulation.
And I hear that Lord Darcy actually wrote the foreword for that book, which says a lot.
Absolutely. Sarah Phillips is highly respected in the healthcare field, and VeinTrain is starting to gain a lot of attention too.
I'm curious, have they received any awards or recognition for their work?
Yeah, actually they have. They were recognized as a global innovator at the World Innovation Summit for Health. Let me see, back in 2018. And their training programs are being used all over the world now. By the way, their programs are used by NHS providers and organizations.
Okay, so we know they're doing great things, but let's talk about their halo effect concept, where they train individuals who then go on to train others within their organizations. What do you think about that?
I think it's a brilliant way to scale their impact. They're not just training individuals, they're creating a system where best practices can spread throughout a whole organization.
It's a much more sustainable approach, isn't it? And it makes sense that a small clinic would have different needs than a large hospital.
Right, and that's why they have their tiered Halo system with different levels like bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. It lets them cater to the specific needs of different organizations.
So they're accessible, innovative, and they have lots of positive feedback. But we shouldn't forget about the problem they're trying to solve, right? Those costs associated with failed venepuncture and cannulation attempts. They mentioned some pretty shocking figures in their materials.
Oh, yeah. Wasted supplies, longer hospital stays, increased risk of infection. It all adds up. But I think the human cost is even more significant. All the discomfort and anxiety that patients go through when these procedures go wrong. And then there's the potential for long-term complications.
It's easy to focus on the numbers, but we can't forget about the human side of things. And think about how demoralizing it must be for healthcare workers when they struggle with these essential procedures. It can't be good for their confidence or morale.
You're absolutely right. And that's something that VeinTrain seems to get. It's not just about teaching technical skills, it's about building confidence and creating a better experience for everyone involved.
And speaking of that, they mentioned a new accelerator program that lets trainees start immediately with online training and then join live support sessions later. It's kind of like they're flipping the traditional classroom model. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's another example of how they're constantly innovating and adapting to the needs of their learners. It's a perfect blend of self-paced learning and expert guidance.
And it's incredibly practical for people who are already working and can't just take time off for a traditional training program. It shows that they're not content with just resting on their laurels. They're always looking for ways to improve and expand their offerings.
The possibilities are pretty exciting when you think about it.
Yeah, VeinTrain might have started with a very specific focus, but it feels like they're paving the way for a future where healthcare training is more accessible, engaging, and effective for everyone.
A future where healthcare professionals feel confident and competent in their skills and where patients receive the best possible care. That's a future I'm definitely excited to see.
Me too.